Hi, I'm Steve McCord, Cattaraugus County Director of Veteran Services, and this is Our Veterans, Their Stories, preserving our heroes' stories, one story at a time.
I'll start way back in 1961 when I was working a lot of hours. I didn't graduate in 1961 from West Seneca Central because I was just working too much. I had good marks, 85s and stuff like that, but never turned in my English term paper nor my history one. So they didn't give me my diploma. And I was, making donuts for a guy that owned a donut shop right across from the Southgate Plaza in West Seneca there. And I'm sitting on the lawn one morning in the front of my house, and I'm talking to my buddy who lived down the street, and I said, Paul, I said, I think I'm going to join the Army. I said, I think this Vietnam thing is going to get a little bit worse than it is right now. And I had the foresight back and then to figure that out. And this was 1961, September. So he says, yeah, okay. I said, but you know what? I'm going to try and get into something like tanks. In fact, back then the Army had a little jingle. They would say, artillery, armor, and infantry, you can join any one of the three. The Army would guarantee, So I went to a recruiter there, and I think it was down to Hamburg. In fact, when I did join, they refused me.
Really?
They said my heart was beating too fast. Well, I was excited, and they called it rapicardia.
Okay.
So I said, well, gee, I really want to go in. So I went to a private doctor. They took an electrocardiogram test. I said, there's nothing wrong with you. And he wrote up a slip, and I went back, and the Army took me. So joined the Army. My MOS was high, or my marks were high as far as mechanics go, because I was kind of a motorhead when I was at West Seneca anyways. In fact, we had a auto shop there. They let us bring our cars in to work on them, So I fit pretty good in tanks, and they promised I would get that. So off to Fort Dix I went, Fort Dix, New Jersey. They took us by train from downtown Buffalo into Fort Dix. It was all kind of scary to begin with, you get there, you get the haircut, they have you in a temporary barracks. And what made me laugh is that they made us dress up in our Class A uniforms, which were the khaki ones, back then. And they took us by bus over to where our barracks were going to be. So we're getting off the bus, and we got this really nice uniform on, and we're dragging a duffel bag. And there's a sergeant standing there with a swagger stick beating the heck out of us as we got off the bus. And to top it off, he had a German accent. I'm thinking, gee, didn't we just win that war? And so we stumbled off the bus. A couple of guys tripped and fell into the dirt. And I'm thinking, gee, why did they get us all dressed up? So anyways, I survived basic training at Fort Dix. It was 8 weeks. And they, people always tell you, don't volunteer for anything, but I did volunteer. They asked if anybody had a driver's license. Up went my hand, and I became a Jeep driver in basic training. So whenever the sergeant would want to go out to the bivouac area, they'd call on me in the barracks, and I'd get the Jeep ready and take them out. So that worked out pretty good for me. But another thing I volunteered for when I was there, this becomes part of my story, was they wanted to know if anybody wanted to go airborne. And I volunteered for that too. So I figured, well, the heck with tanks. Being airborne sounds really, really something nice, so I could really get in shape. I was a high school wrestler anyways, and a weightlifter. So they made us get up extra early to run more miles than the regular guys. And I went through all the basic training thinking I was going airborne. So when basic was over with, they sent me to Fort Knox, where they teach you tank training, you know. And I went up to one of the sergeants and I said, you know, must be some mistake because I volunteered for airborne. I've been doing all this extra training. Why am I going to Fort Knox? They said, they gave me this cock and bull story. Well, sometimes guys that are in airborne rendezvous with their tank on the ground, and that's why we want you to be airborne plus armor. But it was just a bunch of bull. I go through 8 weeks of training at Fort Knox for tank driving and all that stuff and the different weapons involved. And after that, they sent me to Fort Benning, Georgia. And I'm thinking, gee, that's where the towers are. That's where they teach, you know, airborne training. I guess they are telling the truth. So I get a reception there at Fort Benning, and I says, I guess I'm going airborne. And the guy said, no, you're not. He said, you're going out to a place called Harmony Church. That's like 14 miles from Main Post. And you're going to be in a tank division out there. I said, are you kidding? I said, no. I says, I'm supposed to be airborne. And he said, no. He said, not according to my records here. He says, you're going to Harmony Church. So out I went. We were out in the boondocks. And I get there to Harmony Church and hook up with a platoon. And what we did there at Fort Benning in the Harmony, our particular division, we ran a lot of exhibitions for dignitaries. You know, we would get 5 tanks parked next to each other, probably 1 inch between end connectors on our tracks. You know what I mean? And we'd be pointing downrange, and we'd hear the guy talking to people in the bleachers. These could be a bunch of dignitaries from across the country or the world, you know, or they could be WACs, or they could be people on OCS. And when he'd get to a certain cue in his talk, we would open up on this hillside. And I mean, you're talking 50 calibers, 30 calibers, the main mill. We could get 4 rounds off in 13 seconds with the main gun. We'd have one in the chamber, one in our hand, one between our knees, and one in the rack. And if you were a good loader, you could get 4 rounds off. And what a display of firepower. Not to mention we had a flamethrower shooting too, and the helicopters coming in, you know. So that hill was basically destroyed by the time we got done with it. And it all lasted 13 seconds. Then the smoke would clear, and heck, sometimes you'd go up to the bleachers and there'd be wet spots here and there of people that probably, you know, couldn't hold it. But that's what we did at Benning. So I always felt guilty that I didn't get to go airborne and I didn't get to fight and be in combat like my fellow officers, you know, fellow Army guys. So I went up to my tank commander and said, you know, I still want to go airborne. And by that time I had been with him almost a year, you know, the tank crew. And so I took all the push-ups you had to do and the pull-ups and stuff like that. And I finally got approval to go airborne. They were going to send me down to Main Post to start training. And my tank commander probably saved my life. But he comes up to me and says, I promise you a promotion next month if you stay and be my driver. And I said, well, that's a pretty nice offer. I said, can you guarantee that? He said, I guarantee it. I said, okay, I'll stay. But that little phrase maybe upset my list, but you know, saved my life, I don't know. But I became his driver, or I remained his driver, and we spent the rest of my time there at Fort Benning, except for when the Cuban crisis came along. And I also remember, this was Kennedy was assassinated while I was in the military, but that was after the Cuban crisis, because he called Khrushchev's bluff, if you remember. And so we went down to Patrick Air Force Base for the Cuban crisis. And we had security for the Air Force down there. That was probably the best 3 months I had in the whole military, because, I mean, we had fun. We would rent boats and go out on the Banana River and catch flounder, and the cooks would cook us for us. And we had orange roughy and stuff like that, you know. Great meals, and we could eat 4 times a day. The only drawback is we had to pitch our squad tents along the Air Force Base. And the F-16s would fly over our tents, and they'd hit their afterburner, and it'd blast you right out of your bunk bed. Didn't have bunk beds, we had cots, you know, because we were in squad tents. And so we were there for like 3 months, but we had a lot of fun there. And we'd go down and watch the U-2s take off, you know, the surveillance planes. And I'll tell you, when they got to the end of the runway, they would just cock it like that and go straight up like a rocket. It was unbelievable, the power of them planes. And their wings were so long, they had like roller skates on the end, you know. And when they got to a certain speed, their wings lifted up and the roller skates, or the rollers would fall off. And then when they landed, they had enough air under their wings to safely land. And as soon as they got out, they'd take a reel of film that they took and take it right into the big hangar there, and with much security. After I became a civilian, and probably 10 years ago, I run into a guy in the town of Amherst. He was a Jewish Russian. He was in the submarine outfit with the USSR, and he was in one of the submarines that were off the coast of Cuba. And here he is, we're friends now, but he was on one side and I was on the other side. Luckily, Khrushchev backed out, because later, I think we all learned that Castro wanted to nuke, with a small nuke, he wanted to nuke Guantanamo. And that's where we intended on landing. My particular tank was loaded on a ship in Savannah, and I was supposed to rendezvous with it on in the Guantanamo area, and then we were supposed to march across Cuba, you know. But luckily none of that occurred, and that's another thing that probably saved my life. We'd go down to Columbus, Georgia to wine and dine on the weekends and stuff like that. And Phoenix City, Alabama was just across the timeline. So we'd drink as long as we could in Columbus, and then we would cross the river and go to Phoenix City, Alabama and drink another hour, because the time was 1 hour difference. The only thing they got me about everything, you know, we're talking early 60s, and as you know, we have just as many black guys in our outfit as we do white. Right. And you're in Columbus, Georgia, and we'd be at the bus terminal. The buses would take you back to your respective spots at the end of the weekend, like Harmony Church had a bus, Kelly Hill had a bus, and Sand Hill and stuff like that. And but there was a little restaurant in the bus depot, and the black guys couldn't go in there. They had to get their food from hole in the wall, you know. It was whites only. And it made you feel kind of funny, because I was from the north, and here you live with these guys, you know. You share a tank with them, you share your barracks with them, and they can't even eat in the same restaurant as you can, or use the same water fountain, you know. And there were signs everywhere. So that was kind of awkward, I would say. And a lot of my best friends were the black guys in our outfit, you know. We always had fun together. So we also, while we were at Benning, we would train a lot of people too. They would bring South Vietnamese soldiers over. We'd teach them how to fire the .30 caliber and stuff like that. And heck, I remember one time I was down in the turret and I I had a guy from Nigeria, a guy from Vietnam, and a guy from some other country, I can't remember where. And we had what they call a target tank. It had skirts hanging on the side of it, and it was all welded up pretty good. And they would shoot at it as it went back and forth. But when it hit the barber point at the end of the firing range, it's supposed to stop firing. So I'd give the command to cease fire. They'd just turn around, laugh at me because they couldn't understand English. You know, they think I'm telling them they're doing a great job or something. And we did a lot of that. And then, heck, after I become a mechanic, I go up there and one of the tanks that's driving back and forth tells me they got a gas leak. And so I went up in there and I rode back and forth with them. I had to take the firewall off so I could see where the gas was. You know, everything in an Army tank is quick disconnect. So you take the firewall off and there's all the hookups for the engine right there. So I got gas leaking, and I got tracer rounds bouncing around. They're hitting the manifold, and they're coming down in the engine thing there. They're kind of dangerous, you know.
Yeah.
So, but we got through it, you know. And another time, we would also train rangers. We'd hunt them down with dogs, you know, and stuff like that. They were trying to toughen the rangers up, and we'd stick their arms into a bag full of snakes, you know, nothing poisonous, but enough to scare you, you know. Hunt them down with dogs, they'd be up in trees, stuff like that. And, not us, but higher ups would, you know, torture them and stuff like that. Not torture pain-wise, but, you know, put them in a box and have water dripping on their forehead. Different weird things that they did to try and toughen the rangers up. And we would also run aggressor, like we'd put on war games for the dignitaries too. But this whole shooting there with what's his name involved in this Hollywood thing going on now, but kind of reminded me of the war games we used to play, because we used to chase the aggressors and we would purposely shoot them with the wad cutters, the cardboard that would come out of the end of the gun, because it stung when it hit you, you know. You could hear them running through the brush, ouch, 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 you know. We weren't supposed to shoot them, but we did anyway, so. I even remember one time my tank commander took 5 pounds of grease and he put it in we had some blank cartridges for our main 90 millimeter, and he packed it with grease. And here comes an aggressor around the corner with a recoilless on the back of his Jeep, you know, they had the split windshield with the recoilless sticking through. He's just taking aims on us, and we blasted him with the main gun, and the hot grease went all over their goggles, and they couldn't see or nothing, you know. Then we got out of there before they got our number. So we probably should have got arrested for a lot of the stuff we done, but heck, when I became a tank mechanic, they gave me a vehicle called a VTR. It's a vehicle track recovery. It weighs 56 tons, and it's got a cable that pays out in the front. You'd have to have a Jeep to pull the cable out, you know, for pulling tanks in on the got stuck and stuff like that. It had all kinds of hydraulic tools on it. It had a boom for lifting an engine. But I remember coming back from a field training one day, and we had I had 2 tanks on the back, and plus my VTR. Now a tank weighs 50 tons. That's 156 tons, and I'm going down the road 40 miles an hour. So that thing had a lot of power, and it was quite something. One time we were coming back, we had road guards out, and we were going over a road and then down the other side, you know. And 2 guys in a Nash Metropolitan, no less. Remember that little Nash that used to be short and stubby? Well, you would remember, but you would, maybe. And they went past the flag man, and one of our tanks ran right over it. One track went over the hood, the other track went over the trunk. I think the one guy lost his legs, but the other guy collapsed down in there and didn't die or anything. So, but the one guy wound up losing his legs. We had both. We had the M48s. I was authorized to work on M48s and M48A2s.
Yeah.
But the M60s were just coming out. They were diesel as opposed to the gasoline M48s. We could only cruise 70 miles on 265 gallons. That's like 3.5 gallons per mile. Where the M60s, the diesels that they came out with, they had a little more firepower. I think they were 105s and we had 90s. They could go 200 miles on one tank, you know. So it was a great improvement until finally the M1 came along. And
which was a great improvement.
They are superior.
Yes.
One of my kids eventually joined the Army in tanks also, and he went to Korea, but he drove an M1, you know. And he said they're unbelievable. So, not to mention their firepower and the way they are zeroed in and stuff like
Yes,
that.
yes.
It was 4 crewmen, okay? You have a driver who would way down and by himself, away from the turret, okay? And then you have a loader. He's the one that throws the rounds into the round thing, which is kind of a dangerous job too. You gotta make sure you shove it in with your knuckles rather than your fingers. And you have a gunner. He's the one that sights in the whatever you're shooting at, and the tank commander. He's the one that sticks up out of the cupola that's on top. He operates the 50 caliber, and he can also operate the turret too. He can override the gunner. And so that was your 4 people. Now, we all carried a side weapon too, a 45 caliber, I think a model 1911 45. And we also had what they call a grease gun. It looked like a grease gun, but it was a 45 caliber machine gun. It gave you a little short burst. We had a few of those inside the tank turret. So that's your 4 men. Now for a while I drove the flamethrower, which is just a large version of the flamethrowers you see in newsreels, where they're clearing up the islands during Japan, you know. We could shoot probably 300 feet with that, or 300 yards with the, we had a tank in there. There was only 3 crew members on a flamethrower, a driver, a gunner, and the tank commander. Because there's no room because you got a 300-gallon tank in there filled with napalm. And it was pressurized. So you lit like what they call an igniter on the end of your gun barrel, and then when you release the napalm, it goes past the igniter and ignites, then shoots out. I mean, a 2-second burst would put a house completely in flames, you know. So, and that 300 gallons, you probably go in 1 minute, you know, if you released it all. So it was pretty impressive. In fact, we would sneak up on the ground pounders, which are infantrymen, and not sneak up on them, but they'd be playing euchre or some sort of a card game. Because the Army is hurry up and wait. You know, we move out, get to where you got to go, and then you wait there all day for command to move out. So they're playing euchre in front of our tank. And what we would do is start, you know, hit the igniter, and then we'd release air, but no napalm. It would make a hissing noise. They'd throw their cards up in the air and take off running. It was funny. But I guess I had a good sense of humor when I was in, you know, because even when I became a mechanic, I had mechanics helper that, you know, they're really wet behind the ears, and I'd be working on something down in the turret, and I'd say, go get me a left-handed monkey wrench. Yeah. He said, a what? I said, a left-handed monkey wrench. So you'd have to go to the headquarters platoon in the motor pool and go up to the window and ask for a left-handed monkey wrench. Then they would laugh at him, or they'd say, we don't have any go down to company B or something like that, and send the guy all around. We even send him sometimes for a bucket of steam. Go get me a bucket of steam. Make sure you hold it upside down. The fact that I was in part of 1964 qualified me as Vietnam era veteran, but if it had been, if I had joined a little bit sooner, I probably wouldn't have been a Vietnam era, because they didn't declare it until like later in '64.
August of '64.
Was it August?
Yeah.
And look what I got out in September, right?
Yeah.
So it didn't play in my decision a bit. I was just homesick, and that was about it. I had a girlfriend at home and stuff like that, and but initially I wanted to go to Vietnam. I did all that airborne stuff and everything, and thinking I was going to go, and I didn't wind up going.
Well, speaking as someone that spent time in the 18th Airborne Corps and who could feel it the entire right side of his body, be thankful that they did not send you.
Maybe I said, did you wind up being at Benning for a while?
I've been at Benning for a while, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
then you know all about Harmony.
Oh, yeah.
That's where I was. And so my tank commander one day, he says, you know what? He said, we have a battalion reorganization day, and I entered you in a physical fitness contest. I said, oh, great. So the night before, I go to the PX, and me and a friend of mine, we drank, they had that 3.2 Falstaff beer, and I drank 13 half quarts of that stuff. The big cans. Well, the carbohydrates must have did me good, because I wound up winning the whole battalion physical fitness contest. And they had other events though too, but that's what my tank commander entered me in. And what did I get for a reward? A cigarette lighter. I never smoked a cigarette in my life, but before I went to the service, I dabbled with weightlifting and wrestling. I was a high school wrestler in Seneca, so that's how I got into the physical fitness stuff. So, in fact, besides being a driver, when I was at Fort Dix, Mr. Teenage America 1959 was there at the same time. So 2 years before 1961, he's Mr. Teenage America, right? So the sergeants decided to have a weightlifting contest. So I got special meals. I got steak every day. They're trying to, give me the best meals. I had time for training and stuff like that. And I did wind up coming in second. He was the only one that beat me. And so I got to enjoy basic training probably more than the regular guy, because being a driver and getting special attention. But however, the airborne part where I had to run extra miles didn't help. So. But that's kind of my thing in a nutshell. I enjoyed the whole Army thing. And because of that, when I became a policeman, I was a policeman after I got out. 22 years in Orchard Park, and then 8 years in the city of Pittsburgh. And then I worked for a year for immigration too. And you get additional points on competitive exams. I became a lieutenant in Orchard Park, and the 5 additional points helped me. When I took the initial test, the 5 additional points helped me. I got a home loan with the VA benefit loan. And also, while I was with Orchard Park, there was a program called the Law Enforcement Assistance Program, where they would pay for your tuition and books. And so that was all paid for. And then the military sent me a check for $400 every month. So I was basically making money going to school. And all I had to do was promise to stay in police work a certain amount of years, after I completed my graduation. So I got a bachelor's degree from Buffalo State, all because of the military. Because I got my GED while I was at Fort Benning, and I had the good grades anyways. It's just that I never turned in term papers when I was in school because I was too busy with girls and working. In fact, if it wasn't for the girls, I wouldn't have to work so much. So